My true story from Georgia. They hid the wedding invitation and acted like it was lost. I raised her. I paid for her college. I stood by her when no one else did. But when her wedding came, they hid the invitation, like I didn't exist. That was the day I realized, if I wasn't invited to their future, I had to walk into mine, alone, but stronger. If you've ever been treated like you're invisible by the family you built, subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories that they'd rather forget. My name is Eleanor Briggs, and I'm 72 years old. I've lived in this same house in Savannah, Georgia, for 43 years. The magnolia tree in my front yard was just a sapling when my husband Robert planted it the year before he died. Now it towers over the porch, its white blooms heavy with the scent of memories I carry alone. The Spanish moss drapes from its branches like nature's curtains, creating shadows that dance across the wraparound porch where Robert used to sit every evening, reading the newspaper and waving to neighbors walking their dogs. People say I should be proud. They say I raised a remarkable daughter. Natalie graduated summa cum laude from Emory University, landed a corporate job in Atlanta, and climbed her way to regional manager before she turned 30. She drives a BMW, lives in a gated community, and wears designer clothes to charity galas. On paper, she's everything a mother could want, but success has a way of changing people. Or maybe it just reveals who they always were underneath, hidden beneath layers of need and dependence that once made them seem loving. When Robert passed from a sudden heart attack on a humid Tuesday morning in July, Natalie was only 8 years old. I remember finding him in our bedroom, still wearing the blue pajamas I'd ironed the night before. I remember calling 911 with shaking hands while Natalie ate cereal at the kitchen table, completely unaware that her world was about to shatter. I remember the funeral director, a thin man with kind eyes, asking me if I wanted to arrange childcare during the service. I looked down at my little girl in her black dress, the only one we owned, purchased hastily from Walmart the day before, and told him no. She needed to see her daddy laid to rest. She needed to understand that sometimes life takes away the people we love most, and we have to find the strength to keep going, even when every breath feels impossible. The funeral was held at First Methodist, the church where Robert and I were married 12 years earlier. The same church where Natalie had been baptized as a baby, where we'd attended every Sunday as a family, where Robert had sung in the choir with his surprisingly beautiful tenor voice. The pews were filled with faces I recognized, neighbors, co-workers, relatives who would slowly drift away over the following months as the reality of widowhood set in. People are uncomfortable with grief, I learned. They want to help initially, but sustained sorrow makes them nervous. They prefer their tragedies to have neat timelines and tidy resolutions. I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat after the life insurance money ran out. Mornings at Savannah First National as a teller, standing behind bulletproof glass counting other people's money while calculating how far my own paycheck would stretch. Evenings cleaning offices downtown, pushing a cart full of supplies through empty corporate buildings while security guards nodded at me from their desks. The work was honest but exhausting. My hands cracked from industrial cleaning solutions. My back ached from bending over trash cans and scrubbing bathroom floors. But it paid the bills and kept food on our table. Natalie would do her homework in the break room while I vacuumed boardrooms and emptied wastebaskets. She'd curl up on a plastic chair with her books spread across a folding table, her pencil scratching against loose-leaf paper while I worked around her. She never complained, not once. She'd look up when I passed by and smile, giving me thumbs up when she finished math problems or showing me perfectly formed cursive letters when she practiced handwriting. Then, we'd drive home together through the quiet streets of Savannah, past the historic squares with their ancient oak trees and wrought iron benches, both of us tired but grateful to have each other. Our house on Abercorn Street wasn't much, a small 2-bedroom bungalow with original hardwood floors that creaked in all the right places and windows that stuck when it rained. But it was ours. Robert had painted every room himself, choosing colors that made each space feel warm and welcoming. The kitchen was buttercup yellow, the living room sage green, Natalie's bedroom a soft lavender that she'd picked out herself when she turned 6. I kept everything exactly as he'd left it, down to the half-finished crossword puzzle on his nightstand and the coffee mug with his initials that I couldn't bring myself to use. When Natalie was 16, all her friends were getting cars for their birthdays. Shiny new vehicles with GPS systems and premium sound packages. Gifts that cost more than I made in 6 months. I'd been saving every spare dollar for 2 years, hiding cash in a coffee tin behind the flour canister in our pantry. $5 bills from tip money at the bank, $10 bills from Christmas cards, quarters saved from doing laundry at the coin-operated machines until I could afford to fix our broken washer. The day I surprised her with the keys to a used Honda Civic, forest green with 89,000 miles and a small dent in the rear bumper, she cried. Real tears of joy, not the manufactured emotion I'd sometimes catch her practicing in the mirror before school dances. She threw her arms around me and said, "Mama, you're the best mother in the world." I believed her then. I wanted to believe her forever. College applications arrived like a storm cloud on our horizon. Natalie had always been brilliant. Straight A's, honor roll, president of the debate team, volunteer at the animal shelter. Her guidance counselor, Mrs. Martinez, called me in for a conference during her senior year. "Eleanor," she said, spreading Natalie's transcripts across her desk like tarot cards revealing the future. "Your daughter has the grades and test scores to get into any university in the country. She's talking about Emory, which is an excellent choice, but the tuition—" She trailed off, her expression sympathetic but practical. Emory was Natalie's dream school, located in Atlanta, close enough to visit, but far enough to feel independent. The tuition made my stomach turn. More money than I'd ever seen in one place, more than our house was worth, more than I could earn in 3 years of working both jobs. But when I looked at my daughter's face as she talked about her future, about studying business and marketing, about building a career that would never leave her vulnerable the way I'd been after Robert died, I knew I'd find a way. I took out a second mortgage on the house Robert left us, using our home as collateral for my daughter's dreams. I picked up a third job cleaning houses on weekends for wealthy families in the historic district. These were the homes I'd admired from the outside my entire life. Grand mansions with wraparound porches, intricate gardens, and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. I scrubbed their marble bathrooms and polished their silver tea sets while their children attended private schools and their wives planned charity luncheons. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was cleaning the homes of people whose children would be Natalie's classmates, people who wrote tuition checks without batting an eye, while I sacrificed everything for the same opportunity. But every acceptance letter that arrived made it worth it. Duke, Vanderbilt, Georgia Tech, thick envelopes filled with congratulations and scholarship offers, but none of them mattered. Natalie's heart was set on Emory, and I'd promised her dreams would come true. The day she graduated from high school, I sat in the Liberty County High School auditorium wearing the same dress I'd worn to my own graduation 25 years earlier. Navy blue with tiny white flowers bought on clearance from Belk and carefully preserved in tissue paper. Around me, other parents wore expensive suits and carried professional cameras. They talked about graduation parties at country clubs and summer trips to Europe. I clutched my disposable camera and felt proud in a way that had nothing to do with money. Watching Natalie walk across that stage in her cap and gown, I thought about all the sacrifices that led to this moment. The skipped meals when money was tight, the worn-out shoes held together with duct tape, the nights I fell asleep at the kitchen table paying bills by lamplight because I was too tired to make it to bed. Every sacrifice had been worth it to see her succeed, to know she'd never struggle the way I had. She hugged me after the ceremony, her mortarboard slightly askew, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "I couldn't have done this without you, Mama," she whispered in my ear. "Everything I am is because of you." College moved by in a blur of care packages and phone calls. I'd send her homemade cookies in shoeboxes, carefully wrapped in bubble wrap so they wouldn't crumble during shipping. She'd call every few days with updates about her classes, her professors, her new friends. I lived for those conversations, storing up details about her life like treasures. She was studying hard, making good grades, discovering who she was becoming. During her sophomore year, she changed her major from business to marketing with a minor in communications. During her junior year, she landed an internship at a prestigious advertising firm in Atlanta. "Mama," she said during one of our weekly phone calls, "I think I want to stay in Atlanta after I graduate. There are so many opportunities here." Atlanta, 2.5 hours away from Savannah, from the house where she grew up, from the woman who'd sacrificed everything to give her this choice. But I smiled and told her I was proud of her ambition. What else could I say? That I'd hoped she'd come home? That I'd imagined her living nearby? Maybe in one of the renovated downtown apartments, close enough for Sunday dinners and impromptu visits? That I'd already started planning where her children would sleep when they came to visit their grandmother. The day she graduated from Emory, I sat in that massive auditorium wearing the same navy dress, now 3 years older and showing signs of wear despite my careful maintenance. I watched her walk across that stage in her cap and gown, diploma in hand, ready to conquer the world. The pride I felt was overwhelming, mixed with a grief I couldn't name. She was launched now, independent, successful. She didn't need me anymore. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at a restaurant she'd chosen, an upscale place near campus where the waiters wore bow ties and the menu was written in flowing script. She ordered wine to celebrate, something French and expensive that I pretended to understand. "To the future," she said, raising her glass. "To the future," I echoed, though I wasn't sure what mine looked like without her at the center of it. For the first few years after graduation, our relationship felt solid. She'd call every Sunday afternoon while I was cooking dinner, telling me about her job at McKinnon and Associates, her apartment in Virginia Highland, her growing circle of professional friends. She'd visit for holidays, usually arriving Christmas Eve and leaving the day after Christmas, just enough time to exchange gifts and catch up on family news. She'd send flowers on my birthday, always beautiful arrangements from expensive florists, far nicer than anything I would have bought myself. But somewhere along the way, the calls became shorter. The visits turned into quick stops between other obligations. She'd check her phone while I talked, answer texts during dinner at our kitchen table, glance at her watch when I told stories about the neighborhood gossip or my latest volunteer activities at the community center. I started to feel like an item on her to-do list, something to check off between yoga class and grocery shopping, between client meetings and dinner parties with her sophisticated Atlanta friends. The shift was so gradual, I didn't notice it at first. Phone calls that used to last an hour were suddenly 15-minute check-ins. Holiday visits became shorter, more rushed. She'd arrive with lists of errands to run while she was in town. Dry cleaning to pick up, Christmas shopping to finish, friends from high school to see for coffee. I was penciled in around the edges of her real life, important enough to maintain contact, but not central enough to prioritize. Then she met Bradley. He came from the kind of family that had been wealthy for so many generations, they'd forgotten what it felt like to want anything. Old money, they called it in Savannah, though Bradley's family was from Atlanta's Buckhead district. His ancestors had made their fortune in cotton and railroads back when such things were possible, then diversified into real estate and banking as the South modernized. Bradley himself worked at his family's investment firm, a job that seemed to involve more golf than actual labor, at least from what I could observe. The first time Natalie brought him to Sunday dinner, I spent all week preparing. I made my grandmother's fried chicken recipe, the one that required soaking the chicken in buttermilk overnight and seasoning the flour with 13 different spices. I set the table with my good china, the spode pattern Robert and I had received as a wedding gift, carefully preserved for special occasions. I ironed cloth napkins and picked flowers from my garden for a centerpiece. I wanted everything to be perfect for this man who was clearly important to my daughter. Bradley arrived wearing a polo shirt that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget and loafers without socks, a style choice that struck me as impractical but fashionable. He was handsome in an unremarkable way, tall, well-groomed, with the kind of effortless confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. He shook my hand with a firm grip and complimented my home, though his eyes were already cataloging details that marked it as modest. "Mrs. Briggs," he said, in the particular accent wealthy Southerners cultivate, soft consonants and elongated vowels that somehow managed to sound both polite and condescending. "Natalie has told me so much about you." During dinner, he picked at his food and asked if I had any quinoa salad. He'd recently gone gluten-free, he explained, on the advice of his personal trainer. He talked about his work in financial planning, about properties his family owned in Sea Island and Highlands, North Carolina, about a charity golf tournament he was organizing for underprivileged youth. Everything he said was perfectly pleasant and completely foreign to my world. Natalie hung on his every word, laughing at jokes I didn't find particularly funny, agreeing with opinions that seemed half-formed. This wasn't the sharp, independent young woman I'd raised. This was someone performing a version of herself, someone trying very hard to fit into a world that required constant code switching and careful presentation. 3 weeks later, Bradley's mother came to Sunday dinner. Patricia Whitmore arrived 20 minutes late, wearing sunglasses indoors and carrying a purse that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She was perfectly put together in the way that required significant time and money: professionally styled hair, expertly applied makeup, clothes that fit like they'd been tailored specifically for her body. She moved through my modest home like an anthropologist, studying an interesting but primitive culture. "You have such a quaint little home," she said, glancing around my living room with its secondhand furniture and family photos in mismatched frames. Her voice carried the kind of false warmth that Southern women use when they want to be insulting while maintaining plausible deniability. I caught Natalie's eyes across the dinner table and saw something I'd never seen before: embarrassment. She was embarrassed by the house she'd grown up in, embarrassed by the woman who'd sacrificed everything to give her a future, embarrassed by the life that had shaped her into the person Bradley claimed to love. Patricia spent most of the meal talking about their country club's upcoming renovation, a multi-million-dollar project that would add a new spa and expand the golf course. She mentioned mutual friends with names like Buffy and Trey, people who summered in Martha's Vineyard and wintered in Palm Beach. She asked Natalie about her little job at the marketing firm, as if working for a living was an amusing hobby rather than a necessity. When I offered to serve dessert, a pound cake I'd made from scratch using my mother's recipe, Patricia declined, explaining that she was doing a cleanse recommended by her nutritionist. "But I'm sure it's delicious," she added with a smile that never reached her eyes. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen surrounded by the remnants of a meal that had felt more like a performance than a family dinner. I washed the good china by hand, as I always did, and thought about the look in my daughter's eyes when Patricia made her subtle comments about my humble home. The engagement happened 6 months later. Bradley proposed at some trendy restaurant in Buckhead, the kind of place that required reservations weeks in advance and served tiny portions of food with unpronounceable names. Natalie called me at work the next day, crying with joy. "Mama, I'm getting married. Can you believe it? Bradley proposed last night and I said yes." I was genuinely happy for her. Truly, I was. Bradley seemed like a decent enough young man, and if he made my daughter happy, then I was ready to welcome him into our family. But something in her voice sounded different, polished, like she was performing happiness rather than feeling it, reading from a script rather than speaking from her heart. "That's wonderful, honey," I said. Customers lined up at my teller window while I tried to process this life-changing news. "Tell me everything." She launched into a detailed description of the proposal: how Bradley had arranged for the restaurant to serve champagne with the dessert course, how he'd gotten down on one knee right there in front of everyone, how the other diners had applauded when she said yes. The ring was a family heirloom, she explained, a 3-carat diamond that had belonged to Bradley's great-grandmother. It was being resized to fit her finger. "When's the wedding?" I asked. "We're thinking next spring, April maybe, or early May. We want something elegant but not too formal. Patricia is going to help us plan everything." Patricia. Of course she was. The wedding planning began immediately. Patricia took charge with the efficiency of a military commander organizing a major campaign. They needed a venue that could accommodate 300 guests. Bradley's family was extensive and well-connected, apparently, with business associates and family friends who simply had to be invited. They hired a wedding planner named Celeste, who charged more for her services than I'd made in 5 years, but came highly recommended by Patricia's circle. The dress shopping happened at boutiques where assistants served champagne in crystal flutes, and the cheapest gowns cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Natalie would call me afterward with breathless descriptions of silk and lace, of designers whose names I didn't recognize, but who were apparently very important in the world of high-end bridal fashion. At first, Natalie included me in everything. We'd spend Saturday afternoons looking at flower arrangements and cake designs at vendors Patricia had pre-approved. She'd ask my opinion about centerpieces and color schemes. showing me photographs on her phone while we sat at my kitchen table drinking sweet tea. I felt useful again, needed, like I was part of something important. But as the months passed, my input became less welcome. When I suggested using silk flowers instead of fresh arrangements to save money, a practical suggestion from someone who understood the value of $1, Patricia laughed. "Oh, Eleanor, we can't have silk flowers at the Piedmont Driving Club. What would people think?" The Piedmont Driving Club. I'd heard of it, of course, one of Atlanta's most exclusive venues, the kind of place where membership was inherited rather than earned, where families held wedding receptions and debutante balls for generations. It was exactly the sort of location that would impress Patricia's friends and Bradley's business associates. When I offered to make the wedding favors, little sachets filled with lavender from my garden, tied with ribbons and personalized with calligraphy I'd taught myself from a library book, Natalie gently declined. "Thanks, Mama, but we've already ordered Waterford crystal ornaments. Patricia found them at this adorable boutique in Buckhead." Slowly, systematically, I was being edited out of my own daughter's wedding. Every suggestion I made was politely rejected in favor of something more expensive, more sophisticated, more appropriate for the social circles Natalie was joining. My homemade contributions weren't good enough for her new life. The final planning meeting happened on a Tuesday in March, 3 months before the wedding. I'd marked the date carefully in my calendar, circling it in red ink and writing "Final Wedding Plans, 2:00 p.m." in my neatest handwriting. I drove to Atlanta expecting to discuss the last details: seating charts, timeline, final menu selections, all the small but important elements that would make Natalie's day perfect. Instead, I found Natalie, Bradley, and Patricia huddled around Patricia's dining room table with stacks of papers, vendor contracts, and their wedding planner, Celeste. They looked up when I entered, surprise flickering across their faces as if they'd forgotten I was coming. "Oh," Natalie said, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Mama, I thought I told you we moved this to Thursday." I pulled out my small appointment calendar and checked the date I'd written in my own handwriting. "You said Tuesday, honey." I wrote it down right here. Patricia didn't look up from her papers, her pen moving across what appeared to be a seating chart. "Well, we're nearly finished anyway. The important decisions have been made." I stood there for a moment, purse still clutched in my hands, waiting for someone to invite me to sit down, to include me in the conversation about my daughter's wedding. Nobody did. Celeste continued typing on her laptop. Bradley studied his phone. Patricia made notes on her papers. Natalie avoided my eyes. "I'll just head home then," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Natalie walked me to the front door, her heels clicking on Patricia's marble foyer. "I'm sorry about the confusion, Mama. I'll call you later with all the updates." She never called. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was watering my petunias in the front yard when my neighbor Mrs. Chen came over with her mail. Mrs. Chen was 78 years old, a retired schoolteacher whose husband had passed 5 years earlier. We'd become friends over the shared experience of widowhood, often sitting on our porches in the evening, watching the neighborhood children play while we shared stories about our late husbands. "Eleanor, I think the mailman mixed up our deliveries again," she said, holding out an elegant envelope addressed to me in formal calligraphy. "This was in my box, but it's clearly yours." I took the envelope and immediately recognized the return address. It was from the Johnson family, who lived 3 houses down. Inside was a wedding invitation, not Natalie's wedding, but their daughter Rebecca's, which was happening the same weekend as my daughter's ceremony. "When are you leaving for Natalie's wedding?" Mrs. Chen asked, settling into the wicker chair beside mine on the porch. "It's this Saturday, isn't it?" My heart stopped. "This Saturday?" "Oh yes, I saw the announcement in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. They had a lovely engagement photo, such a handsome couple. And I saw some pictures on her Facebook page from the bridal shower. Such an elegant affair at that fancy country club. You must be so excited." I managed to smile and nod until Mrs. Chen went back inside to start dinner for herself. Then I sat alone on my porch steps, staring at the Johnsons' wedding invitation in my shaking hands, trying to process what I'd just heard. I hadn't received an invitation to my own daughter's wedding. The realization hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been waiting patiently for details about the ceremony, while I'd been planning what to wear and wondering about my role in the day, My daughter had been actively excluding me from the most important moment of her life. There had been no lost invitation, no postal error, no oversight. This had been deliberate. I called Natalie immediately, my hands trembling so badly I could barely dial her number. She answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted and rushed. "Hi, Mama," she said, and I could hear traffic in the background, music playing, the sounds of a life in motion. "I'm actually in the middle of something." "Natalie," I interrupted, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "When is your wedding?" A pause, a long, telling pause. "This Saturday, you know that. I haven't received my invitation." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear her mind working, calculating, deciding how to handle this conversation. Oh no. It must have gotten lost in the mail. You know how unreliable the post office can be, especially with all these spring weddings happening. Her voice was too light, too casual, too rehearsed, like she was reading from a script she'd prepared for this exact moment. "Lost in the mail," I repeated, testing the words on my tongue. "I'm so sorry, Mama. I can't believe this happened. Let me text you all the details right now, the time, the address, everything you need to know." But she didn't text me. Hours passed, then a day, then 2 days. When I finally called back, she sent me straight to voicemail. Her cheerful recorded message asked me to leave my name and number, promising she'd get back to me as soon as possible. She didn't call back. I drove to Patricia's house on Thursday afternoon, 2 days before the wedding. I needed to understand what was happening. I needed to look my daughter in the eye and ask her directly if I was invited to her wedding, if I was welcome at the most important day of her life. The Whitmore house was a colonial mansion in Buckhead's most exclusive neighborhood, the kind of place that required a security code to enter the subdivision. The house itself was intimidating. White columns, perfectly manicured gardens, circular driveway filled with expensive cars. It looked like something from a magazine about Southern living, too perfect to be real. The house was buzzing with activity when I arrived. Florists were carrying elaborate arrangements through the front door, cascades of white roses, peonies, and hydrangeas that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Caterers were unloading trucks filled with china, crystal, and silver serving pieces. A team of men in matching uniforms were setting up a massive tent in the backyard, complete with crystal chandeliers and a dance floor. Patricia's housekeeper, a middle-aged woman who looked at me with polite suspicion, directed me to the back patio where I found Natalie and Patricia reviewing final details with their wedding planner. They were bent over seating charts and vendor contracts, their heads close together as they made last-minute decisions about a wedding I apparently wasn't invited to attend. "Mama!" Natalie jumped up when she saw me, genuine surprise replacing the composed expression she'd been wearing. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "About the wedding, about my invitation." Patricia looked between us with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to managing social situations. She gathered her papers efficiently, her movements crisp and purposeful. "I'll give you two some privacy," she said, though her tone suggested this interruption was highly inconvenient. Natalie and I sat down at the patio table, wrought iron painted white to match the house's colonial aesthetic. Around us, workers continued transforming Patricia's backyard into something magical. Twinkling lights strung between ancient oak trees, white roses climbing trellises, elegant table settings for what looked like hundreds of guests. It was beautiful, sophisticated, perfect, everything my daughter had dreamed of. "Where am I sitting?" I asked quietly, watching a worker arrange place cards on tables draped in ivory linens. Natalie's face crumpled like paper caught in the rain. "Mama, where am I sitting, Natalie?" She couldn't meet my eyes. Her hands twisted in her lap, her engagement ring catching the afternoon sunlight. "The venue has capacity restrictions, fire codes, you know. And Bradley's family is so large, he has dozens of cousins, and his parents know so many people. And there are all these business associates we had to invite for Bradley's career. And Patricia has friends from the country club who've known Bradley since he was a child. Where am I sitting?" "You're not," she whispered, the words barely audible. There wasn't room. The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of my lungs. I sat there staring at my daughter, this woman I'd raised from infancy, educated with my life savings, supported through every challenge and celebration. and realized she was a stranger. Somewhere along the way, the child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms had become someone capable of excluding her own mother from the most important day of her life. "I raised you," I said softly, my voice steady despite the devastation spreading through my chest. "I worked 3 jobs to pay for your college education. I took out a second mortgage on my home so you could follow your dreams. I gave up everything, vacations, retirement savings, new clothes, dinners out, so you could have opportunities I never had. And you don't have room for me at your wedding?" Tears were streaming down her face now, mascara leaving dark tracks on her perfectly made-up cheeks. "It's not personal, Mama. It's just complicated. Patricia says modern weddings are different. They're more about the couple's social circle than extended family. It's about networking, about making connections that will help Bradley's career. It's business as much as it's personal. Extended family?" I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady beneath me. "I'm your mother, Natalie, not your extended family. I'm the woman who held your hair when you had the flu. I'm the woman who taught you to drive in the parking lot behind Kroger. I'm the woman who worked nights so you could have dance lessons and summer camp and all the things your friends took for granted. I know, but no buts, Natalie. Either I'm your family or I'm not. Either you want me there on the most important day of your life or you don't. Which is it?" She looked around at all the wedding preparations, all the expensive details, all the symbols of the life she was building without me. The life that required her to choose between the world she was entering and the woman who'd made it possible. "I want you there," she said finally, her voice breaking. "But I want this wedding more." I nodded once, a strange calm settling over me. "Then you've made your choice." "Mama, please." "No, Natalie. You've shown me exactly where I stand in your life. I'm useful when you need something. Money for college, help with problems, someone to call when life gets difficult. But when it comes to celebrating your achievements, to sharing your joy, to being included in your future, I'm not welcome." I walked away from that patio, past the elaborate floral arrangements and expensive decorations, through Patricia's perfectly appointed house, out to my car in the circular driveway. I drove home through Atlanta traffic in complete silence, my hands steady on the wheel for the first time in weeks. Something had crystallized in that moment on Patricia's patio. My daughter had chosen her new life over the woman who made it possible. She'd chosen appearances over authenticity, status over love, networking over family. She'd decided I wasn't sophisticated enough, wealthy enough, connected enough to be part of her special day. And I had a choice to make too. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Harold Summers. He'd handled Robert's estate and helped me navigate the legal challenges of single motherhood. I'd known him for 20 years, trusted him completely, relied on his advice through every major decision since my husband's death. His office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, filled with law books and comfortable furniture that suggested competence without ostentation. "Eleanor," he said warmly when I arrived, his kind eyes crinkling with genuine pleasure at seeing me. "What can I do for you today? I need to change my will." Harold had known my family since Natalie was a child. He'd watched her grow up, celebrated her achievements, understood the sacrifices I'd made to ensure her success. When I explained what had happened with the wedding invitation, his face grew grave, his expression shifting from professional interest to personal concern. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, leaning back in his leather chair. Sometimes family tensions resolve themselves after big events like weddings. Emotions run high during stressful times, perhaps after things settle down. "I'm sure," I said. "If she doesn't see me as family now, she never will. If I'm not important enough to invite to her wedding, then she's not important enough to inherit my life's work." Harold spent an hour walking me through the implications of my decision. The house, my savings account, my life insurance policy, the small but meaningful estate I'd built through decades of careful living. Everything would now go to the Savannah Community Foundation's program for elderly women without family support. Women like me who'd been forgotten by the children they'd raised. "Natalie will inherit nothing," I said firmly, signing the new documents with a steady hand. That Saturday morning, while my daughter married her wealthy fiancé at the Piedmont Driving Club, I drove to the Savannah Community Center on Waters Avenue. I'd been volunteering there for years, helping organize activities for seniors who had nowhere else to go, people who'd been forgotten by families that had moved away or moved on. "Eleanor," called Martha Rodriguez, the program director, when she saw me walking through the front doors. "I didn't expect to see you today. Isn't this your daughter's wedding?" "It is," I said simply, hanging my purse in the volunteer closet. But I realized I had something more important to do. I spent the day helping set up for the center's monthly potluck dinner, an event that brought together dozens of elderly residents who would otherwise spend their Saturday evenings alone. We decorated folding tables with plastic tablecloths and paper napkins, arranged mismatched chairs in conversational clusters, and prepared simple food that tasted better than any fancy wedding cake because it was made with love and shared with gratitude. As the afternoon wore on, familiar faces began arriving. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose children lived in California and called twice a year. Mr. Patterson, whose wife had passed 3 years earlier and whose adult children were too busy with their own lives to check on him regularly. Mrs. Kim, a Korean war bride who'd outlived her husband and most of her friends, who spoke limited English but whose smile needed no translation. These were my people now. Not because we shared blood or obligation, but because we'd chosen each other. We understood what it meant to be forgotten by family, to be seen as burdens rather than blessings, to discover that the people we'd devoted our lives to serving had no room for us in their futures.